podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. This is the Good Brothers Connection over COVID. And COVID
Quarantine edition.
You know what I'm saying? It can't shut us down. So I'm here. This is me, Justice Rajee, with my good brother, Majestic. I have a bottle of what in Oregon we call the $3 chuck because it's $3 in Oregon. It's $2 if you in California.
They turned the price up.
Yeah, it's $1 more in Oregon for whatever reason. That's otherwise known as low cost red wine. I have a bottle of that, and I'm sitting in my office, which is now the home of the worldwide broadcasting system. And I'll let Majestic say something, and then we will go to what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, no. So one, as always, every time I get on a show with a platform like this, right? Because I actually see what you do is more than just a show. It's actually a platform, right? It's a platform for experiences. It's a platform for a narrative. It's a platform for a narrative that is not often spoke about quite as much, right? It's a platform for, just a dialogue that is out of the mainstream, right? So one, it's an honor in whatever capacity to kind of be a part of the platform of what you're doing, whether it's the traditional, Ask Your Oldhead, or kind of like the spinoff, or the What's Happening, or the like. I forget the show that was like the spinoff to What's Happening, or you know what I'm saying? Like when them shows.
That's my mind.
Yeah. Like when them shows had like the episode of like
there was those spinoff of
or the Jeffersons to All in the Family.
Right. I think I can't remember if there was a spinoff show from What's Happening, and not the What's Happening Now, but there was another show.
I thought there was a version of something else that came off of What's Happening. I mean, that could be another conversation for another day, but I do think it was always interesting how, like, it's almost like they discovered Black people in Los Angeles in the 70s.
They said, hey, there's Black people right down the street.
And just like, like there's before it was like, okay, everything is in New York or whatever have you. Then it was like, guess what? It's actually Black people in Los Angeles. Let's do Saturday and Son. Right. Or let's do, you know what I mean? Like, let's do What's Happening. Like,
yeah.
Which actually inadvertently, interesting enough, was I think responsible for exposing the East Coast and Midwest, or everywhere that wasn't the West Coast, to a certain element of West Coast culture. Not, and interestingly enough, not gang culture.
Right.
But dance culture. There was no mention of Bloods and Crips. You figure they started in 71. It was Street Toughs.
You know what I'm saying? Boy,
they got to look like Bruce Lee. Remember the dudes look like Bruce Lee in it? Like the dude that would hang out with the Black dudes, the Asian dudes, like Bruce Lee. They say he do martial arts and shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was no mention of actual Bloods and Crips culture. Whereas in, so anyway. But yeah, it's as always, it's an honor to be here.
Indeed. So to give folks, if you listen to last episode of the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast, I mentioned, so we were supposed to be in Houston this weekend, right now. That was the plan. That was the mission. That was the follow up to the Chicago trip last year, to continue our new annual tradition, so to speak, of coming together, building on own goals and organizing, and also reaffirming and we'll say strengthening our bonds and our unity, so to speak. And COVID-19 required brothers to adjust their plans, and I detailed to some degree uh, change, but so from your perspective, Jessica, how did this play out in your mind and in your experience as we had to make the choice to not travel? I mean, I don't know if we would have had the choice. How did you get there? How did it happen to you?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing that it is. It actually speaks to a part of how you function in the society of, like, as some people call it, a healthy suspicion of white people, but by extension, it becomes a healthy suspicion of, like, it ain't nearly as bad as they ever tell you it is, until it's as bad, until it's worse than they told you it was. So and part of that, I think, is frankly, without trying to make this about national politics, part of it was, if nothing else, when the federal government, the leader of the federal government, the leader of the country is saying, like, it's nothing. Don't sweat it. It won't get here.
It's all good.
It's all good. Like, it's not worse than the flu, right? So you're looking at the last white man saying, okay, well, the last white man said it ain't bad, then it probably ain't bad. Because
you're top of the white man food chain. And he's
top of the white man food chain. Like, what do you mean? It's going to be okay. Like, it's Donald Trump. And so, looking at the importance of coming together, the importance of those bonds, and to your point, what does it mean? If you ever look at television shows, when men come together, it's always like, just like sport and play, right?
Yeah.
There's never explicit strengthening of bonds and talking about your focuses and what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
It's like golf and, like, in the 70s, bad go-go dancing, and you know what I'm saying? Like, so, for us to be,
bar, you know what I'm saying?
Right, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, okay, you grow up and feel like what it means for men to come together is to, like, get away from other people,
right,
versus like to come together. So I think the idea, whether starting and looking in Chicago that we had the experiences in, then also these cities as experiences and kind of centers of Black, Brown, Indigenous, depending on the situation, culture, from Chicago in its role, in Black folks' history in America, but also Mexican and Puerto Rican history, which I think doesn't often get enough credit, of the role that Chicago plays in all those communities. Then to Durham, being in Durham and being there with the Black Wall Street and kind of those experiences. And then to think about Houston and to think about the, kind of unsung experiences of Black folks in Houston, to say nothing of the fact that it once was another country, where some other folks are from, and also not to erase the indigenous presence, right? Because even some of those times we erase the indigenous presence because of the conversation between the United States and Mexico.
Yeah, well,
we're still a colonial.
Yeah, I just finished a recent reading of a great book about the Comanches, which totally reshapes how you think about all of that, and solidifies my personal. I have an itch about the way people talk about the Mexican state as a national entity, as a reflection of the aspirations of the indigenous peoples of anywhere, and it's not. So, like, but that's for
that's helpful, because I'm reading a book. I don't ever remember right now, but it's the book that focuses on after Wounded Knee, because a lot of stuff focuses on before Wounded Knee. Yeah. But when you look at, like, what happened after Wounded Knee, and again, to your point, sometimes you had this conversation around it was Mexico, but then it's like you're still having a debate around colonial interests, right?
Yeah. What I'll say to save us the conversation about is essentially the Comanche people and their trading and control pastoral state is basically responsible for the U.S. being able to cede those lands from Mexico and creating the conditions for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's in those books that you read, there are no saints here, right? There's this, and again, there's like agency, right? Because sometimes in these dialogues, there's no agency, especially from the indigenous people, right? There's like something happened to them, a great fear, a great vector happened to them, and then life went on. Versus their role, there's sometimes their complicity, sometimes going back and forth, like it wasn't either or. So anyway, like that experience to be able to come together, and then also be able to look at the last year and say, okay, from a year to year level, what are you thinking about, and where are things, and be able to have that level of accountability, which I think is the biggest thing about the beauty of the convening, is the degree of accountability, to not just have personal accountability, to have familial accountability, but then to also have a degree of communal accountability, which I think, gives another positive layer to thinking about it. So, the idea of not being able to go is kind of like, what do you mean we can't go? But again, because our federal government, if we would have had a better response from our federal government, we would have known 2 weeks in advance we weren't going. Because it would have been like, no, you can't go there.
So the cold piece is, so the auto payment for the joint come out, and it's like, heading to the, I'm like, seems like this is getting serious, but nah, it's gonna be cool. Like, I got to convince myself, I was like, nah, it'll be better. And it's all gonna come together. The second payment come out, and we'll talk about if we got to change it. There'll be a couple more days. You know what I'm saying? And then a couple more days, the NBA shut down, tennis shut down, ball shut down. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's like, hey man, party's over. Everybody go home.
That's what I'm saying. So you have one like institution that's telling you that everything's fine. You have all these other institutions that are telling you, no, everything's not fine.
Right.
And you should probably chill.
Right.
And so,
I'm still, I mean, as of even that Thursday morning after we was like, I think we might have to, I was like, I mean, it might not be so bad. I was like, man, you going to the airport, it ain't a big deal. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I talking about? I can't expose myself to a potentially lethal pathogen of any kind.
I mean, for me, it was the idea of like, what's it gonna be like when we try to get back? Like, by that time, where will America be? Because if you followed it based on this idea of Italy, right? If you follow this whole MSNBC idea that you should look at Italy 6 days ago, and that's where you are now. Like, Italy was shutting down flights within the country and woo-de-woo. So it's like, and then Houston, Harris County in Houston, they wasn't, I think, being the most open about their amount of cases.
I mean, it might be a case, may not be a case. Who knows, man? Who really knows?
Right.
I mean,
somebody at the rodeo, then they kind of like, somebody at the rodeo, so we'll shut down the rodeo. My thing is, y'all going to shut down the entire rodeo, dog? Like, that's what let me know, like, okay, you know what? If y'all are willing to sacrifice millions of dollars, maybe I don't need to come.
I listened to Bomani Jones' podcast, and I'm a listener of his work, and he grew up in the youth. He'll tell you, like, he talked about it on his show. If they stop in the rodeo, if somebody stops the rodeo, it's serious. You know what I'm saying? Like, that rodeo is like a big deal. It ain't like we don't know about it. Like Beyonce, the rodeo, Selena, all kinds of different cross-sectional entertainment, and it's a really big deal. It's a level of seriousness, and I would say, in our lifetime, to me, this is an unprecedented response to a public health situation. Like, somebody I said on the other one, like, there was a meme, like, look at all these other pandemics that have happened in the last 20 years. I'm like, and we ain't stopped for none of them. We ain't even pump the brakes. Like, hey man, America, keep rolling.
No, remember the one we did? Not America clearly didn't stop. But remember the one we was going to Canada? What was that? Was that bird flu?
The
You
SARS.
might already been it. The SARS. Yeah. Like I remember we didn't come because of the SARS one time.
I might have been. I don't think I was.
You was already. Yeah, you was already out. You was already out the way. But yeah, I mean, I think we had them. But again, there's a testament to like, I mean, H1N1 killed a fair amount of people.
Yeah.
But they actually treated it like professionals, right? It was actually an adult that actually was, and that's where it kind of like, you know, I'm reading Tip O'Neill's book, Man of the House, which is his story of like, from him getting in politics in like the 40s all the way to like 87 when he retires. Fascinating read. Probably the best political biography I've ever read. And that's a thing, because I've read a lot of political biographies.
Indeed.
It's up there with Willie Brown. Like, it's an engaging read top to bottom. But one thing Tip O'Neill was known for was saying all politics is local, right? That was one of his famous sayings. But then when you see stuff like our president, when you see stuff like what's going on, you see like all politics is local, but the decisions that are made on the federal level just have huge outsized impacts. Like when Trump spoke the other night, like last Wednesday night, for 11 minutes, and they called it the most expensive speech ever. Because the markets went down, like they lost billions of dollars because of 11 minutes in talking.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're right, like from a public health emergency, we've never seen nothing. What we've seen was 9/11, which was like an area, right?
Yeah.
That was like a region that got shut down, right? Or Katrina, there was a region that took months or years to rebuild, right? But we've never seen nothing that actually has gripped the entire country at the same time, which I think makes this a very unique one. Because it's not Katrina, it's not 9/11, it's not oil spills, right? It's not any hurricane in Miami, right?
Not flooding.
It's not flooding. It's not a tornado through Nashville, right? Like it's everyone is having the same experience to some degree. Clearly some areas where there's more congregation, and you know, for a variety of reasons, they're going to get hit harder, right? So the idea that New York, Chicago, and the Bay Area and LA are going to get hit harder, that makes sense. From a broader perspective of like just people from everywhere coming and going, not being able to trace community spread, right? So yeah, I mean, in the public, and also it gives you a reflection of like America, right? Like this idea, one of like nothing's going to stop my fun, right? It's almost like an 8-year-old, right? It's almost like America's a big 8-year-old. Like nothing's going to stop my fun. Like if you told me I got to sit down, as soon as you walk away, I'm gonna stand back up and play until you turn back around. Until you come back, like Debo, like, you know what I'm saying? When he leave, I shut up. But when, you know what I'm saying? But when he be quiet, I start talking again. Like, what do you mean? Like, yo, listen, man, I tell you, being in government, when we made the decision to shut down St. Patrick's Day, man, that felt like the weirdest, strangest, most like overbearing governmental decision you could ever imagine. Like I just was like, oh man, we shutting down St. Patrick's Day, like, you know what I mean? And people was like, when we said it, it was like, wait, you shutting down St. Patrick's Day? Like what? Right now we look like public health geniuses, but that Wednesday we didn't look like public health geniuses. We look like, you know, like party, you know, like just I don't know what the term is, party poopers to the fourth degree,
trying to mess it up for everybody.
Yeah, you do-gooder teetotalers trying to mess up a good party.
Yeah, I'm saying, right? Trying to have a good time, man. What's up with that?
Yeah, so it was like, yo, we shut down St. Patrick's Day parade. But like, so the idea for people that you weren't going to do something, and even up until last weekend, right? Like different cities across the country, people were out like there was not this idea of it being a virus,
infectious,
a pandemic in the country. Yeah.
We were supposed to go wedding on Sunday, and like each day as things progressed, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm staying house. You know what I'm saying? Like we had a couple wedding things to wrap up. We did that. And then it was like Sunday. I was like, I don't think we should go to this wedding. You know, it was just a reception. Like, just seems like, you know, we just tell them we want to come see them. You know, after all this, go on a trip or something. We tell them we congratulations or whatever. Because it's sort of like, especially once you read a little bit and understand and understand how communicable diseases are moved. It's like just being around, just being outside is an opportunity to, heebie-jeebies. So just not do that. You know what I mean? But it's kind of hard to. I understand people being hard to accept that something's happening when you can't see it, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a zombie.
Well, and also just the strategic challenge of, and I understand why, because it is true. But the idea of like, if you're young, you probably won't get it. If you're this, you probably won't get it. Well, that just tells people, well, shit, I'm not going to get it then. And then the Americans are selfish anyway. So it's not like they don't really care for their neighbor all like that. Right. Like as much as we say stuff like that.
I mean, they live next to me. I mean, they seem like nice people. But
exactly. You start asking yourself in this day and time, really, how many of your neighbors do you know? Do you know? Not just do you know their name, but like, do you go to their house? Like, I'll say even as a kid, I did far more of that than I do personally as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my community.
My current neighbors a little bit by face, but I obviously don't know their names. You know.
That's what I'm saying. Like most of us, the vast majority of us don't know our neighbors, right? And because our tribes, I mean, we're living in a time of like decentralization where our quote unquote tribes are not based in neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. They're sometimes not even based in cities, right? You could be connected to somebody across the world and talk to them once a day, and the people next door to you, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you add that into like, okay, you're going to do something for your neighbor, I think it's an interesting idea that the social capital concept and the social bonds of America in 1948, right? Because everyone's like, we got through the war. Well, that was 1948.
Right.
Right? Like we haven't been, there's just hugely different conditions around what it means to lean on your neighbor, or even looking at like what happened here with the Tree of Life massacre. That's an entirely different thing to lean on your neighbor. You're looking at your neighbor in the broadest possible sense, right? You're not looking at your neighbor in a personal sense of like the person that's next door to you, right? So people was just like, listen, I'm going to go party. Or the people that were still down Daytona Beach are still down South Beach. Like, listen, man.
I'm let it hang out. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here.
Listen.
They're trying to shut down the flow, but we ain't going to let them.
Corona where? The only Corona I know is a beer. You know what I'm saying?
I take mine with lime.
Yeah, only Corona I know I take with lime and tequila. Like, you know what I mean? So it is it's a fascinating look at like culture. And then also the other thing, man, is how truly interconnected the economy is, and how the economy is so based on the psychology of all of us doing certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's so based on us eating out.
Yeah. I mean, moving, eating something, getting, even if it's, I mean, in between eating, destination, right. Celebratory eating, dropping your GoPro camera on the floor eating, whatever have you. There's definitely I mean, as this started happening and it was becoming relevant, like, I mean, it was like overnight for a lot of
It's
like, yo, if nobody come in, if we don't hit these numbers the next 2 days, our business is a wrap. Like, and if there's any switch from sort of the flow that basically all this is predicated on, none of it works. You know what I mean? Or which is a bit fascinating. When you think about it on one level, because the perception of strength in businesses as a protect all against whatever particular economic hardship, especially if it comes to our community, right? And it's like, yes, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have businesses and run businesses, but also, businesses are still fit within what is your paradigm for like structural survival and how things work and how things are protected and what is prioritized, and can all the businesses or the industry you've created survive if it suddenly has to stop for a month? You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what we're gonna see. But that's where you find how fragile the American economy is, and the global economy by extension, frankly, right? The global economy is so fragile. Because what was interesting was even looking at one of my favorite menswear stores, right? That's pretty high end. I mean, everything is pretty expensive. But like, they've been closed in some cities for about 3 or 4 days, and they've already had to go on sale on the internet. That everything is 20% off. They've already had to go on sale. Like, and these are $1,000 suits. These are not, you know what I mean? So if that's happening on a place that it's only been a week and they're already saying like, listen, we gotta do this to stay open.
Yeah.
Then it lets you know how fragile the American economy is and the global economy, because again, some of their stuff is sourced from Italy, which is totally upside down because they haven't been able to work for 3 weeks. You know what I mean? So then people can't get their stuff out of Italy to even get to America. And now the stores in America, which do a lot of the sourcing of the stuff in Italy, and when London is going to go through a shutdown because, Boris is like Trump on steroids, Boris Johnson, he told them just all get the herd immunity. He said, just everybody get together, get it. That way it won't be a problem. Like he said, like chicken pox, like everybody in the houses get it. And that way,
right?
You know what I mean?
It'll be mellow. We'll just bounce back.
Yeah. So if you think about that, man, it's a challenge to do it. One thing, for all your listeners, I will say, if ever they're up, when they're up in the morning, because your listeners will be up in the morning. This ain't the Breakfast Club and shit. Yeah. Watch MSNBC and then watch Bloomberg. And watching the differences in what they talk about is fascinating. Like, just watch Bloomberg Daybreak and just how they look at what's happening across the planet versus how we look at what's happening across the planet. It'll make you see that much of what we're fed as news is really not as much news as we think. Like, if you juxtapose BBC, Bloomberg, and MSNBC or CNN, totally different conversations. Totally different narratives.
Yeah, I try to scrape across the news like websites and to get an understanding of like, what data do I need to know so I can make decisions, here, like about there was one that actually helped me a lot. It actually got me definitely to be like, man, we can't go to this wedding. I looked at the infographic piece in Washington Post displaying like how social distancing or quarantine and these different models of stopping something are supposed to work in terms of reducing spread. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a really good visualization. That makes total sense. We need to stay at the house, right? But there was also, I could see where some people would just be like, well, man, look, we just all get sick. And then, a whole lot of people going, die or whatever. It'll be cool. It's just like, nah, man, that's not necessarily, if we can avoid that, that's not a good thing. And then it's the residual effects of, how one thing spills into the next thing. You know what I mean? And that if a whole bunch, if a if our healthcare system is overwhelmed, other people who have all the other things that are happening with people, from cancer to other respiratory issues to congenital chronic diseases, medical, everything, diabetes, you name it. All of them people still need ICU, need certain treatments, need access to doctors that have had some rest. People getting in car accidents, people getting hurt on the job, like all of that stuff, is all happening at the same time. It's not not as if these entities, these places, one thing. And I think that we can have a limited, we can limit a view to like my needs, and my needs are, well, something happens to me, I want somebody to take care of me. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's a good chance that if whatever you have happening is relative, even if it's like your pinky got chopped off, it's like, well, we could bandage that up and just call it gold, because we got 85 people we trying to keep on ventilators, and we really can't help you and your pinky, right? And a lot of us ain't gonna be like, we're losing my pinky, for the other people going there and lose our biscuits. So I think it is a lot to think of these things as systems and not just as your point of contact, which I think is where folks tend to land.
Well, to add on, I think your point about for example, how many of us know the percentage of beds that are open in any particular night? Now, that doesn't matter to everybody until there's a rush on the hospitals.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if only 7% of the beds are open on any given night, and the American system is based on 93% like bed, filling of beds. Right. Once anything gets too high, it's going to throw the entire model off. Because if we don't know that our model is based on 93% of these beds are full, not 50%, not 75%, but 93% of the beds are full.
Yeah.
Which also says to yourself why elective surgeries makes so much sense. Because to get to 93% of the beds being full,
you got to get people in there. Like, man,
some people you going to tell to have surgery that might not need to have surgery. Like, you might not have needed to have that surgery today. But guess what? You're going to have the surgery today because we got to get to 93% in order to make sense.
We got to hit these numbers.
Hit these numbers, which is to your point about the food or clothing, same way. We got to hit these numbers. So the whole thing is based on these kind of numbers that are so fragile, right? And I think when everyone comes back to, well, it'll be interesting because one part of it says when everyone comes back, you recognize that the rules can be suspended.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The thing I've been thinking about, I mean, this is a prelude to, I think, at least a sea change in the way a lot of our systems function. Because, I mean, from, the simplest one, the internet has clearly displayed itself to be a public utility. And I don't want to get nobody political trouble. Right. However,
that's state issue. Don't worry about me. I'm cool.
Indeed.
But state problems.
All these different remedies and how we're going to communicate and we're going to do this so people can stay connected is like, yeah, but everybody need to have internet access and decent internet access for these to be rules, right? Like now, there's some wiggle room for style and quality and bandwidth levels and all that. Great. But the idea that like anybody, the leg that was left to stand on is real shaky to justify the, like, yeah, I should be able to get a competitive offer on my bandwidth that I want to use and not just have, I got two choices because this person ran the wires in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? I don't see how the future of our communication and a lot of our other systems are going to function without, high quality internet. Like, it just, if we had to depend on broadcast television and dial-up phones to get people aware, or for people to have their vehicle to check in on what they should do, man, everybody would have been outside. They'd be like, wait, you ain't get that email? Email, what's that? You know what I'm saying? what's a website? I ain't never seen one of them. Like, this is one example. And then, you got kids at home, You got, a lot of people's jobs who maybe folks could work remotely more often, kind of had to embrace the idea, even if they weren't totally comfortable with that or understood how that would work for their particular field or business. But then it also highlights the divide that there's a whole lot of industries that people got to be there physically to get the stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And all of this cool technology and the visual stuff, and we, virtually connecting, like that's great for certain stuff, but it's still the vast majority of stuff. I mean, the thing I've been thinking about is the food production. And I haven't, I'm gonna have to do some digging to see who, I'm sure somebody's writing something about it. I mean, there's already a shortage of workers in our agricultural system due to what's been going on the last 2 to 3 years. And then you have this happen, and it's spring, right? Like, there's a ripple effect of how that industry has constructed itself to be financially effective. Is this high concentration of produce, and 70% of our food comes from California. Like, everybody.
From one area of California, not just California, like a couple hundred square miles.
And it didn't used to be that way, but that's the way it is now. And what does that look like if a lot of people, some people can't get out there doing the planting and potatoes, whatever the vegetable plant, animal, whatever people is eating, there's a lot of it coming out of that state. And that is a clear change and a ripple that I don't know what that's going to look like in a couple months. Now, there's overseas production and, buying stuff from other countries and other stuff, blah, 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 blah. But this situation begs the business case for, everything cannot be this like kind of optimization of lean functioning and like right on the margin. We're going to squeeze out this much, like there needs to be more buffer in all of these systems.
No, you're right. And it needs, and that's from corporate stuff to community. Like and this is not victim people blaming, but this is just a broader sense of the world. Mm-hmm. If we function like you cannot go more than a month without getting a check, you are economically vulnerable. That doesn't matter if you make $100,000 or $10,000.
Yeah.
If you make $100,000, you can't go more than a month. You're vulnerable, right? So it's not a necessarily like a people, like a person thing or class shaming, but there is a broader conversation around what does it mean for people to have lives that are truly kind of like functional, not even comfortable, like functional, right? Like, like what's happening where literally 2 weeks out, somebody is going to have a challenge being able to take care of their families, like 2 weeks out. You know what I mean? And so if we're okay with that or are okay with functioning like that, often because of the derby-like element of the economy, which is, well, I'm a bartender or I'm a valet driver or I'm a this, and tips get me enough, and I can even make more than you some months, right?
Right.
Or I'm a this, right?
When the All-Star game came,
right. Yeah. I made this much. You never made this much. I'm a Uber driver. You know what I mean? From traveling, man, having conversations with Uber and Lyft drivers, because I'm not trying to privilege one over the other. Until they come and support Justin.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. when they come and support what you want to do, and then we'll speak on one over the other. But like, you speak to Uber and Lyft drivers about how much money they make, why they do it. It's almost like a roll of the dice, because like Wednesday night, unless it's the opera or the game, is going to suck. But
right.
Saturday makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Right? Like
the Thursday let out off of what's the name? Where they have the Boogaloo Festival every other, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But other days
I can make my money up, right? So instead of being consistent, like by the nature it's not consistent. And again, to some degree, the success of the Republican Party is that we've all bought into a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we've all bought into all of this, right? Like there was a point, and I think because it's so fascinating to me because of my particular work right now, but like there was a time where this idea of like tax credits, only Republicans believed in tax credits. Like it was the most business thing in the world.
Yeah.
Now, every liberal Democrat in the world is saying, you don't have to pay taxes as long as you give it over here to do this.
Yeah.
Right? So like everyone has brought in and accepted the primacy of tax credits as a manner of getting money to communities versus government taking the money and just doing that. Right, versus you saying government's going to take the $4 million and put it over here.
Yeah, we're going to do it via.
We've accepted that the trade-off is you don't have to pay taxes.
Right, and
just send some percentage of the money over here.
Yeah.
To do a public good. Right? Like not a private good, to do a public good. And we've all accepted it. Yeah. The goddamn ghost of Jack Kemp. You know what I'm saying? Like, but we've all bought into like this is normal operating procedure, right? So again, I think to your point, I think buying into and figuring out like, okay, is the stuff we're doing, does it make sense? It might be what we were doing, but this is the thing that we should be doing.
Right. Was this the best plan?
And what does that mean going forward? Right. And then, or was it the plan you had at your disposal, which over time became the best plan?
Right. And was this the plan that got the least amount of people feeling, I don't want to be giving out handouts, or I don't want to take a handout, or that's those two. There's there's just nobody in there. So I mean, why we need those extra rooms? It's like, well, I mean, you have the extra rooms so that when you need them, you don't have to build them. You don't have to open up an old hospital to get it re-established so you can actually serve people. You don't have to buy motels to suddenly house and quarantine people who are sick. You don't have, you don't have to do all these extraordinary measures to meet something that, quite frankly, I'm sure there's someone smart enough they could have modeled and mapped out like, yeah, in the case of a disease that did this, we need these things. You know what I'm saying? So let's make sure we have a plan where how we can either acquire or activate these specific resources when we need them. And then we don't need them, we can do these other things with them, or, I don't know, they operate a different way. But it and I'm gonna take a swing at the you don't got to go to college crowd, because I'm not saying everybody don't gotta go to college, but we have a low level of medical professionals. Like, there's like a whole lot of people, and I'm too far down this other road to become a medical professional. I can do great first aid, and I could probably learn some field surgery or something.
You could probably do field surgery and keep some people alive, roadblock.
keep that wound closed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you could probably do some triage roadblock. You could probably keep people alive for
you gotta patch the wound. You know what I mean? Like I can get in there with a little bit of that, but if somebody really got a critical thing happening, man, I want somebody that know what they're doing. And I want that person to be well rested because they had somebody else to back them up so they could go lay down. You know what I'm saying? Instead of they doing 16-hour joints. You know what I'm saying? They doing maybe in an emergency they doing. You know what I mean? And I don't care how much it costs to pay them, because when we need them, like I said, my father-in-law, the grandfather to my children, is a neurosurgeon, and if I need his professional skills, I want him to be rested and ready to run. You know what I'm saying? Meaning I'm in a car accident. I fell off a ladder at my job. An air conditioner fell on me, damaged my spine and my brain. I want Fred. Happy birthday, Fred. I want Fred at peak capacity, ready to rock. I don't want him going, man, I just did my third car accident in the last 24 hours, and I guess we got to do this guy now because there's no one else. Like we whatever we got to do to control people making some of these different roles in our society sort of this like prize you win at the end of sort of the academic warfare. Oh, he's a doctor. Very smart. It's like it. I mean, I guess that's cool if your family's proud, but ultimately, we need you to be a doctor so when someone's not well, we can get someone to help them. It's not really about your, kind of the personal accolade.
That's an interesting point that I'm going to say. Is an interesting, as we was growing up, you had this thing of being a doctor or a lawyer, right? Everybody, families. But there's an interesting space between being doctors and lawyers, meaning at some point, a whole bunch of people that wanted to be lawyers went to go do other stuff, right? And then now they may even have a law degree, which, we discussed, I argue, is just a very good degree to be a citizen, if nothing else. But that's where it's separated between, like, if you're going to be a lawyer, you could go over here, you could be a politician, you could do this over here, do general counsel for somebody, you could do this, you could do JD, MBA, right? You could do a whole bunch of stuff. But like going to be a doctor is like you had to stay over there, and like you said, it's like academic, like what's the Oakland A's thing about the how they used to
the beanball,
beanball, yeah. Like it is beanball, but they call them there. But yeah, like academic beanball. Like no, sometimes you just need the people to act in service to people, and that might mean medicine, right? But where we go, to act in service to people might mean like you're going to be a social worker. Right. And so because you're like, okay, well, you're going to act in service to people, but because there's so many people that want to act in service to people, we're not going to pay you a lot. Right. Versus,
really love it. It's really close to your heart.
Because you really love it. And because we have enough of you, but not enough of you over here. Right. And, also it's interesting you say that. I think about like St. Elsewhere. Remember St. Elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The movie that used to be on, the show that used to come on NBC.
Yeah.
Like, remember the shows that used to come on that presented doctors?
Yeah.
There's not as many shows that talk about like doctors being doctors anymore.
Yeah. I mean, there's
like now all the ones is like you want to be police.
Yeah, they got the emergency response.
Which ones?
The 911. I ain't never watch it, but it's like, it's like tidal waves and exploding buildings and all kinds of crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like fire trucks on fire. A lot of wild stuff every time I see a commercial.
Not like.
And then like,
you know what I mean? So it's
shot out. Watch that show.
Right, because then it's like all the doctors and people who are like doctors are like real bizarre, right? They're like bizarre people. Like you don't want to be them. Like Messiah's not going to be a doctor when he watches this show. Like you know what I'm saying?
Man, I don't want to be like this guy.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And so, I mean, to your point, I think it may not be a grand reset as we think, because I've thought a lot of stuff would be a reset. I thought after 9/11, people would have thought about the relationship between the American government and
for our militaristic policy.
Yeah, I would have thought. I thought our foreign policy would have came under more scrutiny.
They said, "Nah, we doubling down. we doubling down. Big dog." You know what I'm saying? We ain't going no.
So I know sometimes I'll be like, oh no, after this, people are going to see it differently. And then it goes back to not seeing it differently. But I will say, I mean, for those I think who are thoughtful about what this means, and this all relates to Houston, because for us to be able to go and do what we wanted to do and have the full experience, there were so many other things that needed to be in play, right? Like we could have gone and just said, okay, we're going to stay in the house, which was a large part of it. But there's also part of the broader experience of that place and experience it in supporting small businesses, supporting like the city that you're in, that we see with something like this, like literally you're having to shift human capital. Like today, Permane Brothers in Pittsburgh, they're now working with Giant Eagle to like shift the people who are working at Permane Brothers to work at Giant Eagle.
That's dope.
And yeah, but Versailles in Miami is doing the same thing with a supermarket in Miami. right? So there's a thing of like some businesses are winning and some businesses are losing. So we're shifting human capital at approximately the same price to another thing, which kind of infers that the capital, the skill sets that they were utilizing wasn't really privileged in that particular space.
Yeah,
Which is a whole nother thing. But the Rona be damned. We still we still survive. Even though y'all didn't, we didn't have the convening, y'all still gonna get this.
Right, y'all gonna get this. You might get some more too.
Y'all listen. Y'all might get a whole bunch now that we, now instead of coming together, we gonna talk to each other.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We pulling up on the hour mark.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what there was something specific that you wanted to add on. I don't think we got to around public health and choice, and could you pose that piece? I don't know.
Yeah. As we go, so I just wanted. I've been thinking about this, and in my role as chief equity officer, what you find, the broader dialogue or context of equity across the country has been about people having choice and nothing for us without us, nothing for us, not by us, all the different FUBU terms, right? So it's been interesting to look at the relationship of public health and equity, where generally everyone will say, okay, where's your equity lens? But you find there's still conversation, but much fewer dialogues around the equity dialogue of voice, specifically when it comes to public health. And Jess, I think you made a very good point around, and I've heard this from other folks across the country around, like, well, life or death is kind of the greatest sense of voice. So if I preserve your life, I can theoretically or practically suspend your sense of voice, which is an interesting conversation because it begins a taxonomy of importance around voice, right? So, like, I can say, hey, once I save you, we can get back to that later, which I'm actually okay with as far as a very practical GSD getting things done perspective. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting context around, okay, so where does voice become prominent?
Well, something.
Go
ahead.
Where does voice become prominent? And in another podcast, because I didn't even want to go into this today, but I've been listening to Ezra Klein after his book came out, and not to date the podcast, but he was talking to Dan Pfeiffer that used to work in Obama land, but he just talked about Democrats or the liberal progressive repulsion with power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And the repulsion of truly having power. And I actually see the taxonomy in the relationship to voice in all these conversations as having actually a connection to the liberal and progressive idea of what power truly means around voice, and not voice for the sake of voice, but voice as a very prominent sense of determining one's destiny. But I want to get into that after this, because I think there's a part of like, that's it because there's something really deep around, if I give you voice, is it voice?
Right. Yeah.
Now again, if I choose a leader, don't get me wrong. If I choose a leader and I choose an executive, and that executive takes the liberties to do things to save people and act on the health, safety, and welfare of a group of people, then that's what you should do. And you can choose if you like them or not, because you get rid of them.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But there's a deeper conversation that I want to kind of dive into it in another.
The thing I run up against in between my worlds of service and community work and community service, and then personally, trying to do things and build things, is you get into I've seen this weird space where we mistake, and it might be too strong a word, but I'm just the one I got in my head. Getting your position out into the public atmosphere, right, about something that's happening or is going to happen or you don't want to have happen or what have you, as the same or like the interplay between that and you not just getting to make the decision, but then the actual follow through and the completion of whatever the decision making is, right? And that the relationships between these things seem to be skewed in a way that's not, I don't think is beneficial for everybody. You know what I mean? In a sense, right? So I was just listening to a podcast about uh, Connor Dougherty's book about like Bay Area housing and something else. I'll find the name of it later on. Larry Wilmore's podcast, and sort of the YIMBY piece where there's people that's like, "Yo, I want you to build housing." And on the other hand, there's people like, "No, I don't want you to build housing that might gentrify my neighborhood." And the way these in a lot of different regions, these are people who sometimes might be otherwise politically aligned, but in this particular argument or discussion, they're not, because they see how this is going to play out differently. They see what's most important differently, and we don't, I can cite a lot of, either we don't have public political leaders that are skilled enough to make them talk or to resolve it, or we don't have other implementation issues or notes. I mean, at that piece I sent y'all, I read a couple months ago about Penn Station in New York, where you have so many different people that can comment and basically maybe not in fact stop the building or something, but because of how it will be perceived, it stops anything from happening. And then you have this hub of transit in the biggest city in the United States that's hot trash. You know what I'm saying? Keep it a buck. No disrespect to New York. You know what I'm saying?
And it's still in that, and all of my
trash.
people, all the people that work at MTN and the Blasio administration, but it's still trash. Because I've been there recently, and thought to myself, how is this functioning like this? And then when you, like, to your point, when you research and go back to like the 60s and 70s, right? But again, I mean, I want to get into this maybe the next time.
Yeah, next time.
It does. Yeah, because this is way too deep for this one to end this one. But it does go into like, yeah, what is the decision and what is the default position, right? What are our default positions? Our default positions that community should control anything that happens in the community, or our default positions that neighborhood change is okay, right? Like, and those are two different perspectives that I think, depending on where you're at, that's a default position. But those default positions come with a degree of agency and power that I like us to dig into a little more.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring us to a wrap on this particular episode. This is just an opening salvo, as they say, opening foray.
That's right. War language.
I love a little combat language. You know what I mean? God bless America and all that. You know what I mean?
Nobody else.
Love it until an NBA player we feel like picking on uses that language. Then we won't get it. But I'm not bringing up old stuff. I'm sorry. Oh, the one thing I do actually, though, speaking of the NBA, because maybe I don't know if you peeped this, but there was a lot of, like, as this stuff was rolling out, right, and like Rudy Gobert and the league, and like people and announcements about testing with NBA players, right, and this is something maybe we could tap in again with. It was like, basically people with the snarky jokes. Oh, I guess I got to be an NBA player to get tested, and the like in the Twitters and all that sort of thing. And it left me, and I had to text that type. I'm like, hey man, they people too. Like, them dudes is people. Like, who? One, the question, you shouldn't be mad about them getting tested. You should be trying to figure out, well, how did these highly paid, trained athletes that deal in a world where their physical health is directly connected to the business of millions of people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hundreds of, at least 32 cities in the United States have on-the-ground economy that depends on them dudes being out there playing. Right? And they were allowed to be exposed to this which I'm totally speculating. But my understanding, the possible vector point was being at the Sloan conference the first week of March.
Right? Oh, MIT Sloan conference out the way.
Yeah, all of them. Some of the player people, because somebody there, somewhere in there, there's a booth that goes on.
There's a patient zero. Oh man,
I might be making stuff up, but I remember I was listening to the reports. I was like, wait a minute, they was at the thing. So like we talking about them, but the question is like, well, at this place where these people were supposed to deal with physical information and other stuff, ain't nobody there go, you know what? Maybe we should slow down the meeting. Seeing that's what was happening in China and what's going on in Italy at the moment. And then though, when people get to talking about it, it's diversion and disregard for the well-being of NBA players because it's the perception of their wealth and vanity or whatever. But it's like, actually, if those guys stop playing in at least 32 cities, a high-level employer, lots of small businesses that serve food, logistics staff, all kinds of stuff shut down overnight because they got sick. So you can frame it as a minor matter, but actually it's not. Now if you got a bigger entertainment growth in America, that's cool. I'm all right with that, but you being mad about that, or you don't want entertainment to be that central to the economy. That's fine, but I would pose this to those people. In a lot of traditional societies, the bridge between entertainment and community building and storytelling is not this like hard line of like this is serious and that's not. Right? Like it's a little bit more of a blend. You know what I'm saying? It ain't. So maybe that ain't the best way for us to have a communal celebratory experience is by watching sports and or listening to music people sing songs, but it's an important connection point.
So just you okay? You know what? I'm gonna try to. They say wrap it up, B. I'm gonna try to wrap it up, but you open up another portal. That was deep. So so there's a part of this too. I think number one to touch on is many of these folks, whether they're from America or not from America, right? Whether they're foreign born, whatever have you, they have done this thing and they may personally be responsible for personal economies of scale. Huh? Right? Okay. Peace, Leia. They may be personally responsible for personal economies of scale in their families and neighborhoods and cities. Mm-hmm. Now, you could debate why you don't like it, but like you said, here's the thing. Okay, do you think in Senegal, the highest, that the soccer player is not a famous person? Do you think in Iran that like the soccer player, the football player is not really well paid? That the sports team is not really well paid, even though it's not in America, right? Like, again, your point about the relationship and the hard line between this idea of being celebratory. It's not like everybody just wants to go and sing folk songs to find their sense of self. Yeah. People find their sense of self in a variety of ways. Right. And our idea that we should not like that, especially, frankly, again, and you could look at top line guys, right? Like, I don't like to use LeBron for everything because sometimes he is the green monkey of sports in a lot of ways, in so many ways, right? Like, so you can't use him to be like defend stuff, but like, whether it's him or so ever many people, what's that issue? And then two, if they are infected and they are around so many people, you should have a challenge with that because they just signed a kid's autograph.
They high-fiving people.
They're talking to... Yeah, they're dripping off of their bodies, as what's the name say? You know what I'm saying? Like, they doing a whole bunch of stuff. So you should be concerned about that. And if they got to, quote unquote, the front of the test because you found out there was an outbreak and literally they have it after playing with another 15 times 6, like, 90 people, right? You should put them people to the front of the test. If somebody could have possibly affected 90 other people, they should go to the front of the test. I don't care who they are. If they're a janitor, they should go to the front of the test. We should confirm
what they got. You know what I'm saying? If they just got it, they all right, cool. Right.
Yeah, so you can't be mad at.
Like, all right, they got the corona. Let's go down the rest of the threads, and it's just.
But again, I think it goes back to this idea of what's important in agency, right? And this idea of like, how do we frame whose thing is important, and where does it come from? Is it a reactive idea of whose thing is important, right? Which again goes into the other conversation. So, yeah, man.
So, what we're gonna do? We're gonna wrap the podcast, but stay with me on the things we can check in after I stop the recording and stuff.
Of course.
But anything you want to say to the universe before I let you go?
Listen, man. There are a lot of great opportunities that come out of chaos, so to speak. One of my favorite shows, Littlefinger talked about let chaos be a ladder on Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah.
So in some ways, the chaos of everything is a ladder for us to be able to have this particular opportunity to share these kind of things. Because again, Ask Your Oldhead is an amazing platform that's based in a very specific narrative where some of this stuff is actually totally connected to Asking Your Oldhead, because we are becoming old heads, even though we don't. At some point, instead of asking us, right? We still talk to the old heads to ask them, but at the same time, people come to ask us. But just to have this kind of dialogue, which is a unique dialogue that, from what I hear, people say that they really want to hear. So thank you, and I look forward to us using this ladder to climb up and talk about more things that are important.
All right. So with that, I'm going to stop us on this part, and then we will see you on the next one.
Peace.
Peace. Thank you for listening to The Good Brothers. This is your host, Justice Rajee. My guest, Majestic. The Good Brothers is us two and others. In these times and in this space, we're doing some new things here at the podcast. And so new methods employed here. So the sound is a little different than what you've used to, bear with us as we figure out the technology to achieve, the outcomes that we enjoy or we prefer. In a time when a lot of folks are suffering and losing, hopefully our conversations, our reflections will be something that brings some strength, some levity, some joy, and just something to think about. And hopefully, willfully and in the future will lead folks to opportunities to develop how they can best get what they need to get done for those they care about most. The show are recorded here live in the Ask Your Oldhead studios, which is basically my recorder wherever I happen to be at. But there's some people I want to thank. I want to thank my brother, Define Culture, Knowledge Bill, Knowledge Divine is out here. We were supposed to be on the road together, and we had to make, I guess 4 of us were supposed to be on the road as it laid out, and we had to make some additions and some changes due to what's happening with the coronavirus. So please, as you're listening to this, stay home. If you don't have to be out, stay home. Take it serious. Treat it with the care and the gravity of the moment that we're in. Also, though, I want to thank Knowledge Divine Music Credit there in the front, some of his work. I want to thank Kappa Consulting, rather. Thank my children for bearing with me and giving me the quiet space or the time to kind of have the sound level where it could be at, so we could have that conversation and record that. And we're going to try, the goal is going to bring you at least one of those every week here for the next couple weeks, maybe more. And also with that, there will be a new episode of just the new season of Ask Your Oldhead in terms of new interviews that just started. One that I was able to get in with a good brother, Carlton Slater. That'll be coming maybe in just a day or two after this. And there'll be more and more down the line. So let's keep together. Let's keep connected. Find me at askyouroldhead.com. Find me on Instagram, Justice Rajee. Find me on the Twitter at Justice Rajee. There's also an Ask Your Oldhead Twitter, which I don't really post anything on. So if somebody starts posting on that, you let me know. In any event, I appreciate you for listening. You want to support the podcast, you can always cash at me at Justice Rajee. You can also purchase a sweatshirt or other apparel at the Ask Your Oldhead Etsy shop. Well, with that, please rate, subscribe, share, and thank you for listening. Peace.